Good evening, folks. I have a discussion C for you all. Let me get set for the show and then we'll do this discussion for you. Okay. Now, tonight's discussion C deals with a study conducted by Columbia University Mailman School of Public Health and the Butler Columbia Aging Center. Okay, so we'll discuss this study tonight for C. So please join me. Okay, a study from Columbia University Mailman School of Public Health and the Butler Columbia Aging Center found that losing a loved one, such as a parent, partner, sibling, or child, may accelerate biological aging. This is measured through DNA markers called epigenetic clocks, which reflect how well cells and organs are functioning. Key findings by this biological aging process can be affected by grief across the lifespan from childhood to adulthood. The study uses data from the National Longitudinal Study of Accelerated Adolescent to Adult Health. Okay. Next page. These effects may help explain some health discrepancies among racial and ethnic groups. As grief related stress adds to cumulative biological burden, it's a striking example of how deeply intertwined emotional trauma and physical health can be. If you'd like, I can help you explore how these findings might influence caregiving strategies or age related care models. These findings showing that grief can accelerate biological aging offer a powerful lens for rethinking caregiving, especially around bereavement support and long-term health planning. Here's how they might influence caregiving strategies. 1. Proactive grief screening. Caregivers could incorporate grief assessment into routines, evaluations, not just after a recent loss, but across the lifespan, recognizing hidden grief in older adults or caregivers themselves may uncover a biological vulnerability before it manifests in illness. Integrative care models. Just as we track blood pressure or glucose, care teams might begin factoring in life stressors like loss contributors to physical decline. This could shift protocols toward integrative uh, by biopsychological care, particularly in geriatrics or palliative care. Expanded caregiving training. Frontline caregivers could be trained to recognize grief as a health risk, not just an emotional state. This might include understanding racial discrepancies as, give me 2 seconds. Communities disproportionately impacted by early loss could face greater biological aging burdens. 4. Enhanced supports for at risk groups. If childhood loss can shape health decades later, we may we might reframe early interventions and target support for adults with known histories of bereavement. That could mean more robust social services, counseling, or trauma informed care. Policies and funding shifts. These findings led scientific backing to policies that treat mental health and grief not as not as soft extras, but as urgent public health concerns. Think Medicare billing codes for grief interventions or funded respite care following spousal death. Data informed care planning for personalized medicine. Advances like you, advocates like you, uh, these results underscore the importance of weaving biomarkers, epigenetic data, and psychosocial histories into dynamic risks profiles that evolve over patient's life course. Okay, this research could be a wake-up call not just for medicine but for how society views grief. It is not just emotional pain, it's embodied, measurable, and uh, crucially modifiable. If you're thinking about applying this in dementia and end of life care, uh, dementia or end of life contexts, I'd love to explore that further with you. Several studies have explored how grief impacts physical and mental health, often in profound, measurable ways. Here are a few that stand out. Number one, bereavement and biological aging. The Columbia study you read is part of a growing body of research linking grief to accelerated aging via epigenetic changes. It echoes earlier findings that chronic stress, including grief, can shorten telomeres, protective uh, caps on uh, cryo, 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 cryomo, chromosomes, chromosomes, chromosomes tied to aging and disease risk. Grief and quality of life. A 2023 study on parents be bereaved by spinal muscular atrophy or SMA examined how grief affects health related quality of life. HRQOL, work, pro- work pro- productivity, and mental health. It found that grief severely uh, correlated with reduced HRQOL and increased depression and anxiety, especially in the years following a child's death. Coping with strategies and mental health. Research in frontiers Research and frontiers in psychiatric explored how people uh, bereaved by sudden or violent deaths, e.g., suicide, accidents, experience higher grief severity and depression. It found that uh, avoidance in cope or avoidance coping worsened outcomes, while supportive and active coping promoted uh, post traumatic growth. Core outcomes in bereavement care. A study in BMC palliative care proposed two core outcomes for elevated evaluating bereavement support, ability to cope with grief and quality of life, and mental well being. It emphasized the need for consistent matrix in grief research and highlighted demonstrations like, hold on, good. social functioning, emotional state, and access to supports. Okay, these studies reinforce that grief isn't just emotional, it's psychological, behavioral, and deep deeply social. If you're thinking about how to integrate this into caregiving models or public health frameworks, I'd I'd be glad to help you map that out. Coping strategies that support both emotional healing and physical health during grief tend to be active, uh, intentional, and socially connected. Here are some evidence based approaches that can make a meaningful difference. Okay, first one, mind and body practices. Techniques like mindfulness, meditation, yoga, tai chi, and deep breathing have been shown to reduce stress hormones and inflammation, which are often elevated during grief. One study even found that an 8-week mind and body program helped older adults reduce grief related stress after spousal loss. 2. Social connection. Isolation can worsen grief's toll on the body. Support groups, therapy, or simply staying connected with trusted friends and family can buffer against depression, anxiety, and even cardiovascular risks. Structured routines. Maintaining daily structure like regular meals, sleep, and light exercise can stabilize circadian rhythms and reduce the psychological chaos grief can trigger. 4. Excessive waiting, ex- expressive writing, or art, journaling, or creative expression can help process complex emotions and reduce hold on uh, rumination. It's especially helpful for those who struggle to verbalize their grief. Okay. Therapeutic support, cognitive behavioral therapy, complicated grief therapy, and trauma informed approaches can help reframe unhelpful, unhelpful thoughts and promote adaptive coping. Spiritual and existential exploration. For some, grief prompts deep questions about meaning and mortality, engaging with spiritual practices, rituals, or philosophical reflection can foster resilience and traumatic growth. 7. Avoidant coping strategies like substance use, emotional suppression, or overworking may offer short term relief but often worsen a long term outcomes. These strategies aren't one size fits all, but combining several, especially those that engage both body and mind, can help mitigate grief's biological impact. If you're thinking about how to integrate these into caregiving public health models, I'd love to help sketch that out. Grief coping strategies can be powerfully integrated into community health programs to support both emotional and physical well being, especially in underserved, high risk populations. Here's how they can be applied: grief informed care training, equipped community health workers, peer supporters, and volunteers with tools to recognize grief related symptoms and offer basic emotional support. This includes understanding cultural expression of grief and when to refer individuals to specialized care. Two, mind and body wellness workshops offer free or low cost sessions in mindfulness, yoga, tai chi, or expressive arts. These can be hosted in community centers, libraries, or faith based organizations to reduce barriers to access and normalize grief shared as a shared human experience. Peer-led peer-led support groups create safe spaces where people to share their stories and coping strategies. These groups can be tailored, for example, those grieving a child, a spouse, or traumatic loss, and facilitated by trained peers or mental health professionals. Grief literacy campaigns use public health messaging to educate communities about the physical and uh, emotional impacts of grief. This could include posters in clinics, social media outreach, or storytelling events that designate designs uh, distinguish grief and also promote healthy coping. Integrated care models enabled grief screenings and supports into existing services like primary care, maternal health, or elder care. For example, a routine checkup could include a brief grief uh, inventory with referrals to counseling or group support if needed. Cultural, culturally responsive programming. Partner partner with local leaders to design grief interventions that reflect community values, spiritual beliefs, and traditions. This ensures programs are not only effective but also embrace embraced. 7. Digital access and telehealth. Expand reach through expand reach through virtual grief support groups, mobile apps for mindfulness or journaling, and teletherapy, especially important in rural areas or resource limited areas. These therapies align beautifully with your interest in person centered care. If you're thinking about how to tailor them for dementia caregivers, underserved populations, or even policy advocacy, I'd love to help build that out. Grief coping strategies can be transformative for underserved populations when thoughtfully adapted to their unique challenges. And second, gotta get strengthens. Here's how they can here here's how they can make a meaningful impact. 1. Reducing health discrepancies. Chronic grief can accelerate biological aging and worsen chronic conditions. By integrating grief support into community health programs, we can help mitigate long term health risks, especially communities already burdened by systematic inquiries. 2. Building trust through culturally grounded care. Strategies that honor cultural traditions like storytelling, spiritual rituals, or communal mourning can foster healing and trust. The culturally informed trauma and grief recovery toolkit is a it is a great example of how to center community values in grief care. 3. Expanded access through peer led models. In areas with limited mental health professionals, training, training community members as peer supporters can create sustainable trusted networks of care. These models are especially effective in rural, immigrant, and low income communities, leveraging tools, leveraging digital tools, telehealth, mobile apps, and virtual support groups can bridge geographic and transportation barriers. Programs like Speaking Grief emphasize how digital outreach can connect marginalized communities with grief services they might otherwise miss, empowering resilience. Many underserved communities already possess strong traditions of mutual aid. Hold on. Spiritually and integrational caregiving. Grief strategies that amplify these strengths rather than impose external models can promote healing and autonomy. Policy, policy advocacy, and funding equality. These strategies also support the case for funding grief services as essential public health infrastructure that includes advocating for Medicare covered of grief counseling or grants for community based healing initiatives. You're thinking about how to tailor these ideas for dementia caregivers, immigrants, families, or trauma exposed youth. I'd love to help you sketch that out. A model that both uh, evidence based and community rooted. Okay, guys, so those are tonight's shows. See everybody Monday for shows. Like I said, see everybody Monday for shows. Until then, greater wellness. Take care, folks.